It was a summer morning in 1650. A marketplace in Rome. Vendors shouted. Chickens squawked. The smell of bread mixed with rotting vegetables. And at a corner stall, a woman sold miracles. Her name was Giulia Tofana. She was middle-aged, unremarkable, the kind of woman you would pass without noticing. But the women of Rome noticed her. They came to her stall quietly, discreetly. They asked for the special water, the cosmetic remedy, Manna of Saint Nicholas of Bari. A beauty tonic, they called it. Good for the complexion. Clears the skin. Makes you look younger. Giulia would nod, smile, wrap a small glass vial in cloth, hand it over, whisper instructions, a few drops in water, or wine, or soup. Very effective. The women would pay, hide the vial, walk away, and within weeks their husbands would be dead. This was not cosmetic water. This was poison. Pure, undetectable, deadly. And over the next decade, Giulia Tofana would sell it to hundreds of women across Italy. By the time authorities caught her, the death count was staggering. 600 men, 600 husbands, fathers, brothers, all poisoned, all by women, all using the same product, Aqua Tofana, the most successful murder weapon in history. And the woman who created it was not a witch, not a madwoman. She was a businesswoman, responding to a market demand. Because in 17th century Italy, women had no legal way to escape abusive marriages. Divorce did not exist. Annulment was nearly impossible. The church said marriage was forever. The law said wives were property. And Giulia Tofana said, here is another option. Freedom in a bottle, for a price. Did you catch that? 600 deaths, one woman, one product. This is not a story about a deranged serial killer. This is a story about systematic oppression and the underground economy it created. Giulia Tofana did not invent poison. Women had been using toxic substances to kill abusive husbands for centuries. What Giulia invented was distribution, branding, a product so reliable, so undetectable, that it became legendary. Women whispered about it. Pass the information in secret. If you need help, if there is no other way, find Giulia. She will give you freedom. But who was Giulia Tofana? Where did she come from? And how did she become the most prolific poisoner in European history? The answers begin, not in Rome, but in Palermo, Sicily. Giulia was born around 1620. Her mother, Tofania d'Adamo, was executed for murder, specifically for poisoning her husband. Giulia watched her mother die, watched the authorities drag her to the scaffold, watched them hang her for the crime of killing the man who beat her. That image never left Giulia. Her mother died because she acted alone, because she was caught, because she had no system, no protection. Giulia decided she would do better. She would not act alone. She would build a network, and she would never get caught. For 30 years, that plan worked perfectly. Giulia moved to Rome sometime in the 1640s. She was a widow, or claimed to be. She had a daughter, Girolama. They lived modestly, rented rooms near the Piazza Navona. Giulia opened a stall in the market, sold cosmetics, perfumes, remedies for common ailments. Nothing suspicious. Just another woman trying to survive in a city full of widows and struggling families. But Giulia had a secret product. A formula passed down from her mother, or developed through experimentation. We will never know exactly. What we do know is the result. Aqua Tofana, a liquid poison so effective it became the most requested murder weapon in Italy. The formula was simple, terrifyingly simple. Arsenic trioxide, lead, belladonna extract, mixed in precise ratios, distilled multiple times. The result was a clear liquid. No color, no taste, no smell, completely undetectable when mixed with wine, water, or food, and absolutely lethal. 4 to 6 drops over several days would kill a healthy man. The symptoms looked like natural illness: fever, weakness, stomach pain, vomiting. Doctors diagnosed plague, or cholera, or bad humors. They never suspected poison, because poison was supposed to be obvious, violent, painful. Aqua Tofana was subtle. It killed slowly, gently, like a disease, and that made it perfect. But Giulia did not sell poison openly. That would be suicide. Instead, she disguised it. The vials were labeled Manna of Saint Nicholas of Bari, a reference to a real substance. Myrrh oil from the tomb of Saint Nicholas in Bari. Pilgrims collected it, used it for healing. It was holy, blessed. Giulia's vials even had images of saints painted on them. To any observer, this was a religious cosmetic. A beauty treatment blessed by the church. Who would suspect? Giulia sold it as face tonic, told customers to apply it to their skin, but she also gave very specific additional instructions. To the right customers. The ones who came asking the right questions. Use a few drops in his evening wine, not all at once. Space it out over days. He will get sick. The doctor will say it is fever. Natural causes. No one will suspect. And if they did suspect, well, Giulia had another layer of protection. She operated through intermediaries, women who distributed for her, trusted contacts in other cities, Naples, Palermo, Perugia, even Venice. Giulia rarely sold directly. She had agents, a network. If someone got caught, they could not trace it back to her. This was not amateur crime. This was organized, professional. A business built on desperation and demand, and the demand was enormous. Because in 17th century Italy, marriage was a trap for women. Once married, you had no legal identity. Your property became your husband's. Your children belonged to him. You could not divorce, could not leave. If your husband beat you, that was his right. If he raped you, that was his conjugal privilege. If he locked you away, no one would intervene. The church said submit. The law said obey. And if you complained, you were hysterical, ungrateful, sinful. Society offered women no escape, no protection, no justice. So some women created their own. They came to Giulia. Young wives married to old men. Women trapped in violent marriages. Mothers watching their daughters suffer the same fate. They came quietly, ashamed, terrified. And Giulia did not judge them. She asked one question. Are you sure? Because once you start, you cannot stop. The woman would nod. Giulia would hand over the vial, explain the dosage, and the woman would leave. A week later, her husband would complain of stomach pain. 2 weeks later, he would be bedridden. A month later, he would be dead, and the widow would be free. Free to remarry or not, free to control her own property, free to live without fear. That freedom cost 4 to 6 drops of Aqua Tofana, and for many women it was worth it. But not all of Giulia's customers were victims of abuse. Some were simply greedy. Young wives who wanted to inherit quickly. Women who preferred their lovers to their husbands. Women who killed not out of desperation, but convenience. Giulia sold to them too. She did not investigate motives, did not conduct moral screenings. If you had money and asked for the product, she sold it. This is where the story gets complicated. Because Giulia Tofana was not a hero. She was not saving women from monsters exclusively. She was enabling murder. Some of those 600 men were abusive, violent, dangerous, but some were just inconvenient. Some were innocent. Some were victims themselves. Giulia did not care. Business was business, and business was excellent. By 1655, Giulia Tofana was wealthy. Not obviously wealthy. She still lived modestly, still sold cosmetics in the market, but she owned property, had money invested, supported a network of women across Italy. She had built an empire on poison, and for a while, she was untouchable. Authorities suspected something. Too many men dying of mysterious fevers, too many young widows remarrying quickly. But they had no proof, no witnesses, no confessions, until one woman broke, one customer who could not live with the guilt, and that confession would bring down everything Giulia had built. Welcome to the most successful and most disturbing murder ring in European history, the story of Giulia Tofana, and the 600 men who died because their society gave women no other choice. Let us talk about what Aqua Tofana actually was. Not the legend, not the myth. The real chemical formula that killed 600 people. Modern toxicologists have analyzed historical descriptions. They believe Aqua Tofana contained 3 primary ingredients: arsenic trioxide, The main killing agent, colorless, tasteless when diluted, highly toxic. A few grains are enough to kill. Lead acetate, also called sugar of lead because it has a slightly sweet taste. It accumulates in the body, damages organs over time, and belladonna extract from the deadly nightshade plant. It causes confusion, blurred vision, or rapid heartbeat. Combined, these three substances created something terrifying, a poison that mimicked natural disease so perfectly that doctors could not tell the difference. Arsenic poisoning looks like cholera, vomiting, diarrhea, dehydration. Lead poisoning causes weakness, abdominal pain, neurological symptoms. Belladonna creates fever and delirium. Put them together in the right doses and you have a death that looks exactly like plague or typhoid. Common diseases in 17th century Italy, diseases that killed thousands every year. Who would suspect poison? Giulia's genius was not inventing these substances, it was perfecting the dosage. Too much arsenic causes violent symptoms, immediate suspicion. Too little takes too long, risks discovery. Giulia found the exact balance, 4 to 6 drops over 4 to 6 days. That was the standard protocol. Administered carefully, deliberately, with patience. Here is how it worked in practice. Day 1. The wife adds 2 drops of Aqua Tofana to her husband's evening wine. He drinks it. Notices nothing unusual. Maybe the wine tastes slightly different. But wine varies. He thinks nothing of it. That night, he sleeps normally. Day 2. He wakes feeling slightly off. Mild nausea. A headache. Nothing serious. His wife expresses concern, brings him breakfast. The breakfast contains 2 more drops. He eats. The symptoms worsen slightly. Stomach cramps, fatigue. He decides to rest, skip work, stay home. Day 3. He is noticeably ill now. Fever, sweating, vomiting. His wife calls a doctor. The doctor examines him, checks his pulse, looks at his tongue, diagnoses an imbalance of humors, prescribes bloodletting, bed rest. The doctor leaves. The wife administers another dose. Day 4. The husband is much worse. High fever, delirious, cannot keep food down. The doctor returns, says it might be plague or cholera. Nothing to do but pray. The wife prays publicly, adds the final drops privately. Day 5 or 6. The husband dies. The doctor signs a death certificate. Natural causes. Fever. The wife weeps. Neighbors console her. The husband is buried quickly. Disease is contagious. No one examines the body closely. No one suspects. Within months, the widow has inherited his property. She is free, and Giulia Tofana is richer. This scenario played out hundreds of times across Italy. Same product, same method, same result. But Giulia did not work alone. She had a network, a sophisticated distribution system that would impress modern drug cartels. At the center was Giulia herself. She manufactured the poison, controlled the formula, managed quality. Nobody else knew the exact recipe. This protected her. If someone got caught with Aqua Tofana, they could not reproduce it, could not implicate her in the manufacturing. They only knew where to buy it, not how it was made. Giulia's daughter Girolama was second in command. She handled distribution in Rome, met with clients, collected payments, delivered product. Mother and daughter worked as a team. Trust was essential. This business required absolute secrecy. Beyond Rome, Giulia had agents in other cities. Women mostly, midwives, herbalists, market vendors. Women with legitimate reasons to sell remedies and cosmetics. They received shipments from Giulia, sold them locally, kept a percentage of profits. This decentralized structure made the operation nearly impossible to shut down. You could arrest one agent, but 10 others continued operating. You could close down one city, but the network stretched across Italy. Giulia had built something resilient, something that would outlive her. The most shocking aspect of Giulia's operation? She used churches, literally. Churches were meeting points. Confession booths were where orders were placed. A woman would go to confession, kneel, speak through the screen. But instead of confessing sins, she would make a request. I need help with my husband. The confessor, if he was part of the network, would give instructions. Go to this market stall. Ask for cosmetic water. Say you were sent by Saint Nicholas. The woman would go, buy the product, return home. This system exploited the sacred nature of confession. What is said in the confessional is secret, protected by church law. A priest cannot reveal it. Ever. Under any circumstances. Giulia's network used this protection as cover. If a priest was complicit, he could facilitate dozens of murders without ever being implicated. If he was not complicit, he heard the confession but could not report it. Either way, the system worked. It was brilliant, horrible, but brilliant. This is how Giulia operated for nearly 20 years without being caught. She hid behind the institutions meant to enforce morality, used them as shields for mass murder. Who were Giulia's typical customers? The historical records give us some profiles. Young women married against their will, often to much older men. These marriages were business arrangements, family alliances. The woman's feelings did not matter. She was traded like property. Many of these women were miserable. Their husbands were cruel, indifferent, abusive. They came to Giulia seeking escape. Battered wives, women whose husbands beat them regularly. In 17th century Italy, domestic violence was not a crime. It was a husband's right to discipline his wife. The church taught that wives should submit, endure, offer their suffering to God. Some women endured. Some sought another solution. Women married to drunks, gamblers, men who squandered family money, who left their wives and children destitute. These women killed not just for freedom, for survival, to protect their children from poverty. Young widows who wanted to remarry, but their new suitors would not accept a living husband, so the husband had to die. These women killed for love, or at least for choice. Mothers protecting daughters. If a father was abusing his daughter, if a brother was threatening a sister, women used Aqua Tofana to eliminate male relatives, not just husbands. But here is the uncomfortable truth. Not all customers were sympathetic. Some were simply greedy, women who wanted to inherit, who were tired of waiting for old husbands to die naturally, women who preferred their lovers to their legal spouses, women who killed for convenience, for money, for passion. Giulia sold to all of them. She did not judge, did not refuse based on morality. If you had money, she had poison. This moral ambiguity is what makes Giulia's story so disturbing. She enabled justified killings and unjustified ones. She freed women from abuse and facilitated murder of innocents. Both things are true, simultaneously. The cost of Aqua Tofana varied. For wealthy women, Giulia charged high prices, enough to make significant profit. For poor women, she sometimes provided it for free, or at steep discounts. Why? Some historians think Giulia genuinely wanted to help abused women, that she saw herself as providing a service, freeing women who had no other option. Others think it was strategic. Poor women could not pay much anyway, but they could spread word of mouth, create demand, build the reputation that brought wealthy customers. Probably both are true. Giulia was complex, not purely evil, not purely good. She was a woman who found a market need and filled it. The need was escape, from violence, from control, from marriages that were prisons. Giulia provided that escape, for a price, and business was excellent until 1659. That year, everything fell apart. One customer, one confession, one priest who broke his vow, and the most successful murder operation in history came crashing down. But before it ended, Giulia Tofana had accomplished something no serial killer before or since has matched. She killed more people than any individual murderer in recorded history. Not personally, but through product distribution. She was not a hands-on killer. She was a manufacturer, a businesswoman, an entrepreneur of death, and for 20 years she was unstoppable. The end came in 1659. After nearly 20 years of operation, after 600 deaths, after hundreds of successful murders, one woman broke. Her name is lost to history. We know only that she was young, married to a wealthy merchant. She bought Aqua Tofana from one of Giulia's agents, took it home, prepared to use it. added drops to her husband's wine over several days. He got sick, exactly as predicted. Fever, weakness, vomiting. The doctor said it was probably plague, told her to prepare for the worst. And suddenly, the woman panicked. She had not expected it to work so quickly, had not expected to watch him suffer, had not expected the guilt. She was terrified, not of getting caught, of living with what she had done. So she did something that broke every rule of Giulia's network. She confessed. Not to the authorities, to a priest. She went to confession, knelt in the booth, and told the priest everything. She had poisoned her husband with a substance called Aqua Tofana, bought from a woman in the market. Her husband was dying. She needed absolution. The priest listened, horror growing with every word. What this woman described was not a single crime. It was evidence of something much larger, an organized network, multiple murders, a conspiracy. The priest faced a terrible choice. Confession is sacred. What is said in the confessional must never be revealed. This is absolute church law. Breaking the seal of confession means excommunication, eternal damnation. But this woman had just confessed to mass murder, to a network that had killed dozens, maybe hundreds. Could he stay silent? He chose to break his vow. The priest went to church authorities, told them what he had heard. Church authorities went to civil authorities. Within days, papal police were investigating. They found the woman's husband, still alive, barely. They questioned him. He confirmed feeling ill for days. They searched the house, found a small vial, clear liquid, hidden in the kitchen. They tested it, fed it to animals. The animals died within hours. This was the proof they needed. They arrested the wife, brought her to the papal prison, tortured her, medieval torture, the strappado, hanging by the wrists with weights on the feet, dislocating shoulders, crushing pain. The woman screamed, confessed everything, named her supplier, an agent of Giulia Tofana. The agent was arrested, tortured, gave up more names, more agents, more customers. The network started collapsing. Within weeks, papal police had arrested dozens of women, all connected to Aqua Tofana, all part of the distribution system, and all of them, under torture, pointed to the same source. Giulia Tofana, the woman at the center, the manufacturer, the architect of 600 murders. Police came for Giulia in July 1659. She was not at home. Someone had warned her. She fled, ran through the streets of Rome, papal guards chasing. She made it to a church, Sant'Onofrio, claimed sanctuary. In medieval and early modern Europe, churches offered legal protection. If you reached a church, authorities could not arrest you, not without special permission. Giulia stayed inside, barricaded. Days passed. Guards surrounded the building, waited. Giulia sent messages, tried to negotiate, offered money, information, anything. The authorities refused. They wanted her, and they wanted her alive. After several days, the guards used a trick. They spread a rumor. Giulia Tofana had fled the church, escaped through a back entrance, was already out of Rome. The crowd outside the church believed it, started to disperse. Giulia, hearing this, thought she was safe, thought the guards had given up. She left the sanctuary, stepped outside. Immediately she was grabbed, arrested, dragged to prison, Sant'Angelo Castle, the papal dungeon, the same place where Beatrice Cenci had been held 60 years earlier. Another woman accused of murdering her abusive father. Giulia was imprisoned, interrogated. They wanted names, wanted the full list of customers, wanted the formula for Aqua Tofana. Giulia refused to talk, so they tortured her. Medieval Rome did not have gentle interrogations. They used the rack, the strappado, the wheel. They broke her body systematically, and eventually she talked, gave names, dozens of names, women who had bought poison, women who had helped distribute it, and most importantly, she gave the formula, the exact recipe for Aqua Tofana, the ratios, the distillation process, everything. The authorities wrote it down, documented it, not to destroy it, to understand it, to identify past victims, to catch more conspirators. Giulia's confession led to a wave of arrests. Women across Rome, across Italy, wives, widows, servants, midwives. Some were guilty of murder. Some were guilty only of knowing about it. Some were probably innocent. Caught up in the panic, the trials were swift, brutal. Many women were tortured into confessions, true or false. The authorities did not care. They wanted this network destroyed, wanted to send a message. Poison will not be tolerated. Women who kill their husbands will die. Giulia Tofana was tried in September 1659. The charges were staggering: 600 counts of murder, conspiracy, heresy, witchcraft. The evidence was her own confession, plus testimony from dozens of arrested women, plus the vials of Aqua Tofana found in multiple homes. The verdict was predetermined, guilty on all counts. The sentence was death, but not quick death. Public execution, designed to terrify, to warn, to punish. On July 11, 1659, Giulia Tofana was taken to Campo de' Fiori, the square in Rome where heretics and criminals were executed, where Giordano Bruno had been burned 59 years earlier. A scaffold had been built. A crowd had gathered, thousands of people, men mostly, shouting, jeering, throwing garbage. They wanted to see the poisoner die. Giulia was brought to the scaffold. Her daughter, Girolama, was with her. Also condemned, also sentenced to death. Mother and daughter, together at the end. The method of execution was strangulation, then burning. First, they would be strangled with a garrote, a metal collar tightened around the neck, crushing the windpipe. Then, once dead, their bodies would be burned, ashes scattered. No burial, no grave, complete erasure. Giulia went first. She did not scream, did not beg, faced death with the same cold calculation she had shown in life. The executioner tightened the garrote. Giulia's face turned purple, her eyes bulged, her body convulsed, then stopped. Dead. Girolama was next. She was younger, more terrified. She cried, begged for mercy. None came. The garrote tightened. She died the same way. Their bodies were thrown onto a pyre, burned while the crowd watched, cheered, celebrated. The ashes were collected, thrown into the Tiber River. Giulia Tofana was gone, but Aqua Tofana was not gone. That is the disturbing truth. Giulia's execution did not end the problem. The formula was now documented, known. Other women copied it, produced their own versions, sold them under different names. Aqua Tofana continued to kill for another 50 years. Into the 18th century, authorities tried to stop it, banned the sale of arsenic, monitored apothecaries, investigated suspicious deaths more carefully. But poison is easy to make, easy to hide, and the demand never disappeared, because the system that created demand never changed. Women were still trapped in abusive marriages, still had no legal recourse, still needed escape, so they continued to seek it. In vials, in powders, in liquids with innocent names. The poisoning slowed, but never stopped. Giulia Tofana became a legend, a cautionary tale, a symbol. To men, she was the ultimate betrayal. Proof that women were dangerous, deceptive, not to be trusted. To women, she was more complicated. Some saw her as a monster, a murderer who gave all women a bad name. Others saw her as a dark hero, a woman who provided escape when no one else would, who fought a system that crushed women, using the only weapon available. Both views are partially true, and both miss something essential. Giulia Tofana was not insane. She was not uniquely evil. She was a product of her time, a time when women had no rights, no protection, no power, and when you strip people of all legal options, they find illegal ones. So who was the real villain in this story? Was it Giulia, the woman who provided poison? Was it the husbands, some of whom were violent abusers? Was it the church and state, who created a system with no escape for women? Was it the customers, who chose murder over endurance? The answer is not simple. History rarely is. Giulia Tofana killed 600 people. That is fact. But how many of those 600 were slowly killing their wives, through violence, through control, through the legal erasure of women's humanity? We do not know. We cannot know. The victims are long dead. Their stories are lost. We have only the scandal, the trials, the executions, the legend. What we can say is this: Giulia Tofana operated in a world that gave women two choices: suffer or resist. Most women chose to suffer, endured, prayed, died quietly. A few chose to resist, and resistance, when all legal options are blocked, becomes crime. Giulia provided a service to those women, a terrible service, a service that involved mass murder, but a service nonetheless. That does not make her a hero. It makes her a symptom of a deeply sick society, a society that valued male authority over female life, that treated women as property, that offered no justice, no protection, no escape. In that society, Aqua Tofana was inevitable. If Giulia had not created it, someone else would have. The demand was there, the desperation was real, and the system that created both remained unchanged long after Giulia turned to ash. 365 years later, we still argue about Giulia Tofana. Was she evil? Was she responding to evil? Can murder ever be justified? Should we condemn the women who bought poison? Should we sympathize with them? These questions have no easy answers. What we can do is remember the context. Remember that divorce did not exist, that domestic violence was legal, that women were property under the law. Remember that every one of those 600 dead men represented a woman who felt she had no other choice. Some were wrong, some were right, most were probably desperate, and Giulia Tofana gave desperation a bottle with a saint's image on it and called it freedom. If you found this investigation thought-provoking, share it with someone who enjoys morally complex history. Like this video to help others discover stories without simple answers. Subscribe for more deep dives into the darkest corners of history. And remember, the most dangerous poisons are not always in bottles. Sometimes they are in systems, in laws, in traditions that cage half the population and call it order. Giulia Tofana understood that, and for 20 years she fought back. With arsenic, with lead, with belladonna, 600 men died. But the question that haunts us is not whether Giulia was evil. It is what kind of world creates a market for murder, and whether that world has truly changed.